Hello, this is another episode of ASEAN Movie Pulse Talks. I'm here with Don Anelli, Ben Stykuc, Adriana Rosati, and Rouven Linnarz. And I'm Panos, Kotzathanasis, by the way. And today we're going to continue this series of talks about some of our favorite movies. And since this month AMP is dedicated to martial arts cinema, we're going to talk about some of our favorite martial arts movies. So, Rouven, you're going to talk to us about Enter the Dragon.
Of course I am, because no martial arts discussion would be complete if we don't talk about Bruce Lee and what is probably his most famous, most popular film, Enter the Dragon, from 1973, directed by Robert Klaus. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Bruce Lee plays a character which simply is called Lee. He's a highly trained martial artist from Hong Kong. And he is given the task by his mentor, Shaolin Monk, to enter a martial arts tournament where a former student of the same temple, a man named Han, who is supposedly has connections with drug and human trafficking, has sort of soiled the reputation of the temple. At the same time, Lee is he's also contacted by a secret agency. I'm not sure if it's a CIA or FBI. It doesn't really matter, to enter the tournament and inspect on their behalf. So he travels to that tournament. With him, many other athletes are traveling there. We get to know a man named Roper, played by John Saxon, who needs the prize money to pay his debts, and Williams, played by Jim Kelly, who represents his home dojo. And while they enter the tournament and have the first festivities, it soon becomes apparent that this tournament is basically a facade for Han to find out who's going to represent his organization overseas. I think that pretty much sums up or gives a good introduction to what Enter the Dragon is about. What I like about this is it's basically a role that Bruce Lee is meant to play. If you see the movies that he did previously, like Fists of Fury or The Big Boss, he has been building up towards this sort of character. It's a very disciplined and serious and charismatic performance by him, not to mention the martial arts scenes, which I really like in that film. He also shows that he has the qualities of a leading man, and this is what I really like about him. It almost feels like I always feel like it's comparable to something like a James Bond film, where he is where he's the protagonist with all the aces up his sleeve. And I think it's a really great film and a great introduction to martial arts cinema in general.
And okay, let me ask you something, because this is always that is on my mind. What do you think of Bruce Lee as an actor? I mean, beyond the martial arts aspect.
Well, I've started watching his filmography from The Big Boss up until I think The Game of Death. I think it was the last film that he did. And if you think of the acting, there is a sort of progression, if you can think of it. I didn't like the acting in Big Boss. I also didn't like the Big Boss that much, to be honest, aside from the fight scenes. Here, I think given the context of martial arts cinema, I have no problem with the acting whatsoever. I think the acting from the other actors, like for example John Saxon, is kind of goofy in that context. However, John Saxon and Jim Kelly, to in all fairness, seem to be enjoying themselves quite a lot performing in these roles.
We also have this the last scene in the mirror with the mirrors is like one of his most iconic and pretty brutal, I guess.
And also, I think most copied films in cinema. If we think of John Wick, I think it was the John Wick Part 2, where they basically copy pasted that scene.
Anyone else about this film? Don?
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic. You have to have mentioned something of his from in one of these kinds of tributes. I agree. I do like the James Bond aspect added onto the martial arts stuff. It adds like a fun little layer to it. I only really have one main gripe with it, and it's outside of Bruce and maybe Jim Kelly, none of the performers really look like they're martial artists. I mean, what's John Saxon doing in this movie? I mean, he has to have been a protege of Bruce to be in this role, but he looks completely out of place in a martial arts film. And how he got so far in the tournament, it just has to have been just script writing rather than his actual skill set, because I couldn't see any.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a minor thing with me when I watch these kind of like these so-called tournament films, like, you know, Bloodsport or Kickboxer or any of those kinds of films where you want to see like the performers actually skillful, and, you know, you want them to actually look like they know what they're doing, and they're, you know, they're actually like capable of like killing somebody, because that's like the end goal is to, you know, kill your opponent to move on. But I mean, it's a minor gripe. You know, Bruce is a lot of fun. You know, you get a lot of other actors in there that are, you know, more than capable of carrying the load for the other guys. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
I guess John Saxon used to be a teen idol of sorts. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he was still popular at that time, so that's why he he was in the movie. Who knows? Rouven, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, John Saxon is sort of extra for me. If you think of him as the cop in Halloween, it's always an extra to see him in a
Nightmare on Elm Street
film. And Halloween too.
Nightmare on Elm Street, not Halloween.
Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, right. What I sometimes think of when I see Enter the Dragon, and especially when I think of the next film, Game of Death. I have a question to the group or those people who have seen the film. What do you think of Robert Klaus as a director?
He seems like a journeyman, you know, nobody special, you know, gets the job done kind of a person.
Yeah, I'm not very fond of him. What is he also did the film with Jet Li, The Master, if I remember. Yeah, The Master, and I don't know. That film is really bad. Like, I don't know. Also
did,
the Game of Death, which is okay, a mess in a number of levels. Okay, but Ben, you want to say something?
Well, I'll start on the Robert Klaus part on that. I think he did something called Force 5, which was basically a rehash of Enter the Dragon with Benio Quides, Joe Lewis, and it's like a comical version and not intentional of Enter the Dragon. But I love Enter the Dragon because for me it's always been that the best example of an exploitation movie, but done by a major studio. You've got the martial arts kind of aspect, you've got the blaxploitation aspect of Jim Kelly, who clearly is having the most fun out of anybody in this. They give him all the best lines during the course of the movie. But it is just an absolutely fascinating to watch. If you look at it now, at all the stars that were going to become stars just cropping up, even in just brief appearances. You have Sammo at the beginning, in the opening sort of confrontation. The little kid is Tong Wei. Jacky Chan appears for about 3 seconds where he gets his neck broken by Bruce Lee in the fight at the end. It's just it's a great thing to sort of watch and try and spot the future star. My only gripe is the end. I love the ending where in the sort of compound, and they've got all the captives, and when you first see them, they all look about 75. And then as soon as Bruce Lee lets them go, they've de-aged by about 50 years, all suddenly capable of martial arts. It's hysterical. It's just great. The John Saxon thing, I think, on there as well, is also kind of tells a little bit about where you were in the 70s, in that you had to have a Caucasian actor in a lead role at that time. There is no way you'd have got Bruce Lee on his own as the lead. You needed some Westerner there. And as you say, as my colleague was saying, that John Saxon does not look like a martial artist at all. I think someone was showing the stuff on set, but as he's going along, but it's just a fantastic film. You watch it, and it has its flaws, but it is the iconic Bruce Lee film.
And just a correction from what I said before, Robert Klaus directed The Big Brawl, not The Master, but The Big Brawl is also a mess, so I was correct on that on that regard. Adriana, do you want to say something?
This is a very I mean, it's a film that it can't be missed in a compilation of best martial arts. Also because first of all, it opened up the way to the American audiences and Western audience for the martial art movies. I mean, it was already open, but this film really pushed them, and then also propel definitely Bruce Lee to super global stardom. And after this film, it was offered loads of money for new films, new parts, and he was on his way to become one of the most paid superstar of the globe.
But then he decided to have drugs for the first time, and it didn't work that well. I guess we can talk about that so many years after that. Okay. All right. So, okay, anyone else want to add about this film? I think we're okay. So next one, Don, you're gonna tell us about Police Story.
Yeah. So my selection is Police Story, 1985, written, directed, and starring Jacky Chan. He plays a cop. Depending on what version you get, he goes by several different names, but the most famous one is that he's called Kakui. He's part of a task force that's trying to bring down a drug overlord that's masquerading as a businessman. And during a sting operation, they managed to capture him and his secretary. Through legal means, they managed to get the kingpin off, but Chan is assigned to guard the secretary, thinking that she has valuable information, though they believe she's under the impression that it's just a legitimate business, that, you know, she's just there as a secretary, not involved in any of the explicit dealings. But the longer they're together, the more they realize that something's going on and that they may be in bigger danger than what they originally planned. So this is one of my all-time favorite films. It's a fantastic classic. The mix of comedy, the mix of martial arts, some of Chan's most iconic stunt work. It's amazing. The final fight in the mall is, to me, one of the best sequences ever made. Just the sheer amount of choreography, the stunt work, getting everything coordinated and put together, and it's a lot of fun. And then mixing it all in with some of Chan's greatest physical comedy. It's one of the best films I've ever seen, and for a long time I ranked it as one of my favorite films of all time. So it's my choice. I wanted to include a Chan film for this one, so this is my choice. So
Okay, and there's also the scene with the cars in the sandy town in the beginning of the film, and the one in the department store in the end where he jumps from whatever and he's being electrocuted while falling down something. Okay, so that's the guy's crazy, and I think this is like a testament to the fact that he is crazy. The things he did are out of this world. I guess that's what his fame is for. Ben, you've seen the film?
I have. I love it. On that one, the very first Jacky Chan films I've ever saw, and that they called it Glass Story for a reason. When they talk about that last sort of 20 minutes is just insane. You see, the outtakes, you're watching, how is that man alive at the end of that movie with all the stuff they're doing? But props to Bridget Lin and Maggie Cheung as well, because they take an absolute pounding during the course of those stunts also. But it's that transition where he's now, and the early movies where he's a martial arts star, here he's a pure action star. And it is just a phenomenal movie. Some people may sort of go about the comedy, but when you have action like that, who cares?
Indeed. And okay, since you mentioned Maggie Cheung and Brigitte, in particular the first one, it's a bit funny because in her first acting roles, which were with Jacky Chan, she just gets slapped around a bit. that's her whole part. I mean, nobody. Okay, she was very beautiful. She was like Miss Universe runner-up or something, but until she left those guys, no one knew how good an actress she was. I mean, after Wong Kar-wai picked her up, and you know what happened next. And also, okay, this whole thing, because we personally, and I think a lot of you have watched a lot of these martial arts movies of the 70s, the Shaw Brothers, and what happened with Golden Harvest next. I think the Golden Harvest is a bit... the role women had in those films is a bit worse, let's say, than what was happening in Shaw Brothers productions on occasion. I mean, there is no Kara Hui in Golden Harvest or Jacky Chan film. They are usually damsel in distress. They're all secondary parts. I'm not sure. What do you think about that? Ben, you've seen a lot of Shaw Brothers films.
Oh, it depends which Shaw Brothers movie you watch, I think, on that bit, because the early Shaw Brothers, you had all the swordswomen movies. Cheng Pei Pei would be fantastic. I'll give you the best example, really, is Come Drink With Me. Fantastic female lead. Then you get Golden Swallow a few years later, directed by Chang Chi. I think I've got that pronunciation right. And she becomes almost secondary to her own film. So the Chang Chi movies very much focused on the brotherhood and the masculinity side. But then you get someone like Chu Yuan, who did a lot of the Wuzar movies, and you get very strong female characters. Lau Ga-lung would have like Kara Wei, so you'd have that. And it is, I think, it depends when you catch the genre. The masculinization of the 70s kind of stuff came through, and the women were sort of sidelined. You've got Angela Mao, who crops up in Enter the Dragon, which we've just been talking about. But they are slightly sort of marginalized till you get sort of Cynthia Rothrock, Michelle Yeoh kind of coming through in the sort of mid to late 80s.
You are right.
I think for me, it's kind of it swings around about. It depends who the director is and their interest in what they're trying to put forward on screen.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it about this film. So next one, Ben, you want to talk about 8-diagram pole fighter?
I did. I thought I'd have to put a Shaw Brothers movie in here somewhere, and this is a sort of twilight end to the classic Shaw Brothers era and the great director Lau Ga-lung, and it is the story of the Yang family who go off betrayed by Pan Mei, and at the Battle of Golden Beach find that they are surrounded by what they think friends and foes. Only 2 brothers survive the confrontation. Brother 5, played by Gordon Liu, and Brother 6, played by the Alexander Fu Sheng. Fu Sheng gets to go back home, but is completely driven insane by what he's seen happen at these events. And Brother 5, Gordon Liu, sort of barely escapes. And you sort of follow him as first he meets a hunter in a cameo by Lau Ga-lung, who turns out to be a former general of Pan Mei, before he ends up in the Shaolin Temple and effectively gate crashes his way into the Shaolin Temple to learn martial arts, to take revenge on those that have betrayed him. And the sort of final act is of the family trying to find him and him learning the techniques of the Shaolin Temple to take revenge. What I love about this movie is it is unlike anything Lau Ga-lung really else directed. It is an angry film. To put it in context, Fu Sheng died during the making of this movie, and it caused sort of rewrites, etc. And you really get that come across. And I liken it to being the 36th Chamber Shaolin's evil twin. In the 36th Chamber Shaolin, you get the almost like Confucian, learn martial arts, take revenge. There's your catharsis, all done, all sorted. You never get that here. Gordon Liu starts angry. He gate crashes into the Shaolin Temple. He shaves his own head, puts the sort of the fires into his head on net. Learns the martial arts. Never ever becomes really at ease. And the techniques they're using in the Shaolin Temple is brutal as well. They're learning how to defang the walls with poles. So even the techniques he's learning there isn't brutal. And the ending, there's no happy ending to this. And normally, whenever you've got all the classic martial arts movies, they would always end with like the fade out. The bad guy has been beaten, the hero's walking off. Here, the hero is still angry. He's got nowhere else to go. And so you have that psychological aspect that's coming through from what's been happening behind the camera onto the camera. And then throw in Lau Garlong, who is a fantastic choreographer. The action sequences are some of the best pure action you see with the martial arts. You have Gordon Liu, Johnny Wang Long Wei, everybody that is anybody in that area is sort of in this movie towards the finale. Kara Hui plays the sister, so gets a brief spell of action in herself. But it said for me, it's the finale where you have even Chang-Chi would be looking going, this is brutal. And it's a very bloody final fight sequence with Shaolin monks going up against their enemies, and they're just pulling the teeth out with poles, which is something I'm watching going, even in Crippled Avengers that didn't go this far, but it just has a power to it that is unlike anything that Lau Garlong would do, and it is just a phenomenal film.
Okay, it is true that it's a very angry film. It's a very dark film, essentially. There is no redemption, as you mentioned. Everything goes from worst to worst, essentially. But okay, why? Why do you think? Let's say.
Well, because I think it's very much, it's almost like Lau Garlong getting his grief and his anger out during the course of it, and you really sort of, because Gordon Liu effectively was almost like his persona on screen for the Shaolin Temple movies, and it is getting that catharsis, getting it out of there. There's this rage that may be coming and grief coming across on the screen, so hence you've got this anger that you would never normally see from him, and it's unusual to have that, and it just, knowing the context behind it makes it, you understand that, and it just makes it work. So it's probably not, it's not a feel-good movie you're going to sit and watch and go, I feel like just watching a martial arts film. It's not one you do there, but you just experience it, and it has a level of psychological intent to it that is missing from movies of that era. So it just, that's where I think that comes from.
Okay. Anyone else, Don, about this film?
Yeah, this is one of, if not my favorite Shaw Brothers films for exactly that reason. Knowing Lau Garlong and what he used to do previously, you know, his work in the 70s, and then you compare it to this, yeah, the angriness and vitriol that he spews in this is just light and day. But the thing is, it works in a martial arts movie because it shows off the brutality of the moves, and it shows off, you know, the anger and ferocity that Gordon Liu has towards those who betrayed him, and it just fits. It just fits for me. And whoever came up with the design of that weapon, God bless you, sir. That thing is a thing of beauty, and they implement that thing in so many creative ways. You have to just watch the finale. Just watching Gordon Liu just bounce around on caskets and multi-tiered, you know, whatever scaffolding kind of whatever kind of scaffolding they have, and just beating like 50 people up with it's just a masterwork. It's not one that, you know, it's, you know, like you said, it's not a rainy day, I just need, you know, want to watch a kung fu film. It's not one of those kinds of films. But if you want to watch, you know, him do something different, if you want to watch just pure angry martial arts, I think this is one of the best to look at.
Okay. Well, I guess Shaw Brothers were kind of famous for the things that they implemented as weapons in their films. Like you have whatever from teapots to flags to new kind of instruments no one ever heard before. They were really great in that aspect. Okay. Anyone else about this? I guess not. Rouven, you've seen the film?
No, I was just listening with interest to what Ben was saying about the film, and to someone who hasn't watched that many Shaw Brothers title, I I have to say, if there's one thing you did in today's video, is you have piqued my interest in that title.
Okay, man. All right, maybe we ask some money from 880 Films at some point. Okay. All right, so I guess next film is my turn, Project A. Okay, I think I've mentioned this a number of times, but okay, let me say this piece of autobiography again. When I was like 9, 10 years old, and I went with my mother in the local video store, and all the kids my age were picking up those silly Greek straight to video movies, comedies of very low quality. But the woman who ran the video store told my mother, don't let him see those garbage. Give him some Jacky Chan to watch. And she gave me Project A, and this is the start of me dealing with Asian cinema from that point. And I think I rented this VHS for once, maybe every second week. I think I have seen the film like 300 times. I don't know how many times I've seen it. I've watched it at least twice every week or something like that. Okay, so to go to the actual film now, okay, you have, I think it's one, okay, a bit about the story first. Jacky Chan is a captain in the Coast Guard who have this rivalry with the police force, and this rivalry gets the better of the Coast Guard when the pirates trick them and manage to detonate all of their ships in the midst of a mission to destroy all the pirates. So Jacky Chan and his whole crew end up being under the supervision of the police force, and then a number of crazy things happen. It is revealed that the British government and some of the higher ups have ties with the pirates. And Dragon with his friends managed to reveal all that, and then all together with deception and courage go to the island of the pirates and beat them all to death or something like that. At least not much of a story, but okay, this is a Jacky Chan film. You don't expect many layers there. So where to start with this film? I mean, the action sequences are some of the most iconic in Jacky Chan careers. You have this police against Coast Guard in the beginning, and Jacky Chan fighting against Yuan Biao. I think it's one of the greatest in his career, in both of their careers actually. And then Sammo Hung comes into the story, and the film really picks up. I think this is the best cooperation of the three brothers, Yuan Biao, Jacky Chan, and Sammo Hung. And then you have this crazy stunt scene where Jacky Chan falls from a clock in the midst of a very high tower that has a clock on it, and he falls through some tents, and it gets completely demolished by the end. It's considered one of his hardest and, again, most iconic. Then you have the last fight where the three of them fight Dick Wei, whom I consider one of the best villains ever to appear on screen, and this is one of his greatest roles. And okay, you have fun, you have fighting, you have everything you need from a martial arts comedy, Jacky Chan style. I think the guy is a genius in that sort of setting, and this film proves it completely. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything about this film. Ben, I'm sure you've seen it.
I read about it. I think for me, this is the transition from the Jacky Chan of the 70s and the martial arts style, some of that young master, to becoming that action star. You really see his style come through here with the stunt work. Like you said, the classic bit of the clock tower where he starts referencing the silent comedians. That's the safety last kind of thing with Harold Lloyd that he's sort of taken off there. And the brawl is just wonderful timing. You look at the little things he does, like with the chair moving and jumping over the chair. It's these little small bits that you start to see a style that moves away from the classical martial arts style and more the unique Jacky Chan thing that you would see coming along. And it's almost like perfectly formed with the three of them on that bit. It is just cinematic perfection. That's all I can really say about it.
I agree. Don, you've seen that?
Yeah, I go back and forth between this one and Dragons Forever is my favorite of the three Kung Fu tiers. I kind of give this one the nod just because I think as a singular film, I think it's a better made movie. And a lot of it is, like you said, Dick Way over Benny Urquidez. I think that's, a big part of it because that man just exudes charisma. And, the scenes of them, struggling to, stay out of his, undercover and trying to stay out of his pathway, I think it's a lot of fun. The comedy in this is fantastic. Some of the greatest, slapstick gags, some of his funniest pratfalls. I love just that bike chase through the streets where they're using the ladders and knocking open doors, trying to, get away from everyone, and they're, smashing into doors or, crashing into ladders and stuff like that. That to me is just hysterical. The final fight is, I think, it probably his best. That is, I would say, the best fight he's ever put on screen. I know a lot of people put Wheels on Meals, but to me, this is the best fight that Jacky's ever put on screen. It's just amazing. All four of them, because you have Biao, Sammo Hung, and Dick Way fighting together against each other, and it's just a sight to behold. I put this one as the best fight that he's ever put on screen, and that's a big plus for me in the film, combined with all the other factors. It's definitely one of his best films, I would say.
And it's also, it's almost funny the amount of running Jacky Chan does in this movie. He never stops. Like, he runs. Like, there is this scene up on the hill where he's trying to save his girlfriend, and he does this whole thing, jumping off the cliff and doing some backflips, gets down, and then he sees that his girlfriend is still on top of the hill, so he goes back again. It's amazing to watch. Rouven?
I think what I like about Jacky Chan, or what I wanted to learn about Jacky Chan, is what made him special. As I told you before we began this video, is that I used this martial arts tribute that we have on AMP to get to know and get to learn a bit more about martial arts cinema. And when I compare, for example, his fighting style to what Bruce Lee did, in the middle of a fight in Enter the Dragon, which is to me one of the most iconic moments for Bruce Lee, is when he suddenly realizes he is captured and he just sits down and he just waits it out. This to me sums up what he is. He's calm. He knows what he's up. He knows what the chances are, and he just stops at this point and lets himself be captured at this point. So it's almost has a meditative or contemplative qualities. Always, even though he is at that point beaten or defeated, it doesn't feel like it. He's still the master of, or in a superior position in a certain kind of way, if you know what I mean. With Jacky Chan, it's completely the opposite. I watched a video just yesterday about 3 stuntmen trying to say what makes Jacky Chan special, and they also did a hobby sort of, or they also did a Jacky Chan inspired fighting scene. They filmed that, and they said the most important thing about Jacky Chan is he takes punches, and most of the time his characters, they don't want to fight. The most iconic gestures, what he's doing all the time. He doesn't want to be hit. He doesn't want to be in that fight. He uses a lot of that environment, and this to me is the arts part in martial arts. This expression that he's doing this, that he's just a natural born entertainer. This is what makes many of his features so much fun to watch. The fight scenes in Project A, but also the fight scenes in the both police story. In both police stories. We just talked about the fight in the department store. Think of the fight in Police Story 2 in the playground. That to me sums up pretty much what defines Jacky Chan's fighting stunt, what makes him such a great performer.
And I think it was the moment that he decided to leave this traditional kung fu style, which, okay, the choreographies are impressive, but they have a certain rhythm to them, like most of them at least. And he decided to let loose completely. This is when he became the star he was, because he's much more than that. He could not be contained, and this fact makes his films more entertaining. I guess he's first and foremost an entertainer, and then a fighter, which, okay, Bruce Lee was first a fighter, which becomes obvious in his movies. Okay, Adriana, you have seen Project A?
Yeah, I've seen it, and I haven't got much to add to what he said. I mean, it's amazing, the fight, the comedy. It's one of my favorite of the three of them. It's maybe my favorite of the three of them. And it's also, apart from the martial arts and everything, fight, fantastic. There's also a very charming film, and it's funny. It's got a nice setting, a nice story, a better story of Police Story, for example, for me. So yeah, it's very, very, very enjoyable.
Okay, well, I guess that's it for Project A. So Adriana, you're gonna tell us about Spooky Encounters?
Yeah, Spooky Encounters, known as Close Encounters of Spooky Kind. This is my copy, signed by Mr. Sammo Hung.
Ah.
Okay, so the story follow Sammo Hung in the part of Bol Chung. There is a pedicab driver, and he's a good fighter and a brave guy, but it's not particularly bright. So for this reason, often gets in trouble. And we see him at the beginning of the film showing off his bravery, and we see his friends trick him into a spooky prank. But while he fools around, his wife and his boss, Master Tam, are having an affair. And because Master Tam doesn't want the adultery to being discovered, he decide to get rid of Chang, as you usually do when you have an affair. You just killed so to do so, he hires a master of witchcraft, a Taoist priest called Chin Hoi, who is able to animate corpses on remote using black magic. And so he managed to force Chang to spend the night in a room with this hopping vampire or this corpse, and Chang barely managed to escape, but there are other magic tricks that are waiting for him. And on top of this, he is chased by the police because he's been framed for the murder of his wife that is vanished, but obviously is not dead, is with the lover. And at this point, there enters another character, another Taoist priest, a good one, because he doesn't agree with Chin Hoi that he's using his skill for bad purposes. And so he offers Chang some help. And like in every good martial arts story, Chang will learn from the Sifu how to fight against the Chin's black magic, and this will lead to the final duel. Now, first of all, I have to say that I'm not a hardcore expert of how martial arts movies are, like all of you, and this is, and I understand that this film is not everybody's cup of tea. There are better martial art films, but I'm very fond of it, and the reason why I love it is because of its unique mix of comedy, slapstick comedy, mad action, and the stunt work, amazing, and the addition of this supernatural element, the horror and the supernatural, and also this film has got two elements that I really like. One is Sammo Hung, and the other one is the Jiangshi, the hopping vampires. This film, in all its imperfections, Spooky Encounters was one of the first Jiangshi films, and he went on opening the way for many future films and inspired the whole subgenre of Hong Kong cinema of these Jiangshi movies. A few years later, in '85, I think, is Mr. Vampire and all his sequel, and The Dead and the Deadly, Vampire vs. Vampire, blah, and many to follow. And the beauty of Spooky Encounters is mainly down all to Sammo Hung, who wrote the film, directed, and stars doing this amazing physical work. And like for Jacky Chan's movie, in Sammo Hung's films, the action is the comedy, and the stunts follow the rules of the slapstick comedy, but they also have some hysterical and breathtaking physical performance. So there are plenty of funny and action scene, like when there is one where Chong sleeps with the rotting dead body, and the corpse start to animate and mirror his movement, and so it's like the choreography is a bit like a dance, and then Chong grabs a brick and hit his own head, hoping that the corpse do the same, and the corpse and he Chong's head, sort of in classic Hong Kong comedy. And then on the martial arts side, I think that there are some good fights, like with the Jiangshi, and there is a very funny piece of comedy and martial arts when in the middle of the film, when the Ching Hoi possess the Chong's right arm, and the arm start to act on his own will, and so he provoke a fight with a group of policemen, and so Sammo Hung ends up fighting at the same time with the group of policemen and against his own arm, which is quite funny, and using props. A bit like Jacky Chan style with the wooden stool, and then the final showdown. Finally, I thought it was quite good, quite sort of violent in the two different levels. There are the two Taoist priests fighting with the witchcraft, and then the Chong and the other the evil priests apprentice are possessed by different entities and fight in different styles. Sammo Hung is possessed by, at some point, the Monkey King, and he fights monkey style, acting as a screeching monkey hanging from scaffolding. And and in this final part, there are maybe some obscure Taoist reference, but it's because of this mix combination of martial art and horror and comedy, make it very enjoyable also to a Western audience that doesn't really grab maybe all this possession of the Taoist elements. And one other thing to say is that many chicken were harmed in the making of this film. There are some very, very bloody and cruel scenes with chicken, and the only woman in the film is treated like in an unprecedented. It wouldn't be possible nowadays. well, I'm not gonna say, but yeah, it's all at the end.
Okay. Well, I guess chickens are the most tortured animals of all as a species. I mean, nobody cares about them, you know. Okay, Don, you have some feelings about the film?
Yeah, I enjoy it for the most part. If I'm looking at it just as a straight film, a lot of what she said is true. The mix of elements is really fun, especially when you realize how early on in Hong Kong history that mixing together comedy, horror, and martial arts was. You see, you know, shortly thereafter, you see films like Bloody Parrot and Human Lanterns, which attempt to mix them together. But the main thing for me is that, as Adriana mentioned, it just feels like a prototype run for Mr. Vampire. Especially, you know, the use of the Jiangshi, the hopping vampire, who's like one of the central opponents for Sammo's character. It's not a huge flaw for me, but it's just one of those where I see a lot of what went on in this film, and I see a lot of what happened in Mr. Vampire. I see a lot of, you know, the slapstick comedies, like the same general style. A lot of the martial arts is the same general style. The mixing of horror and action is kind of the same thing. So it just feels as though, you know, Mr. Vampire took it up to a different level. You know, the martial arts is better, the horror is better. It's not necessarily as scary, but it mixes in ghosts and vampires and, you know, black magic and all that kind of stuff. It just feels like there's a better version of the film out there than Spooky Encounters. So it's one of those where, as much as I enjoy the film, it's like, why would I recommend this one when I can recommend Mr. Vampire? So it's not necessarily a detriment to the film itself. It's just something for me that I find a better film out there in this exact same style. So I tend to look at that one a little bit more favorably. But if you can find Spooky Encounters, or, you know, Close Encounters of the Spooky Kind, whatever title it is, it's still worth a watch. You're still going to have a lot of fun with it. Sammo's a lot of, you know, hysterical in the role. You know, I'm still amazed at some of the physicality that he does, both the comedic role and then, you know, as she mentioned, that final fight with him in the possessed hand, fighting off the cops and then fighting with himself. I mean, that's something that, you know, we got years later when we saw Evil Dead 2, where Bruce Campbell did the same thing, where he's fighting his own possessed hand. So you see a lot of, you know, influences from this film and, you know, stuff that came later. So it's worth a watch, but it's just one of those where I'd say I know that there's a better version of this. There's a better version of the film out there. So that's kind of where I stand with it.
I agree the Mr. Vampire is better, is more refined, but yeah, I like very much Sammo Hung. So as I said, this is down to him. The whole film. I mean, it's him. So. And also, yeah, probably there are better film with Sammo Hung, but I wanted to pick this film because for its significance of being one of the first of introducing the supernatural to the martial art.
Ben?
I'm really intrigued by it because I'm a huge fan of Sammo Hung. I think the man is a genius. And it's where you really sort of see his sort of screen persona starting to form, because he's so malleable in how he sort of changes it. So now, very often from here on in, you see his character is always very brave, not necessarily the most intelligent. He tends to really play like a buffoony kind of characters on there, and he's not afraid to sort of make fun of himself. He uses his own body as part of the joke, and this is one of the first times you sort of see that on several occasions he would do it later on, where he gets possessed and then develops martial arts powers. So you have it here, you got it in Gambling Ghost, whereas Officer Tuba. So he is able to go, well, I don't look like a martial artist, so he finds a way to incorporate it. And it's one of the most typical Hong Kong movies you're going to see. What can we throw together to see if it works? Well, we'll have a bit of martial arts in, we'll throw a bit of comedy in. I know, let's stick a vampire in, let's have a few ghosts coming in on there as well. Have we killed a chicken yet? I don't know. Let's just throw that in on the screen as well. And you don't get that really anywhere else. But here it's just this for all these genres, and somehow it works. And it's just fantastic. And I love the fact that Lam Ching Ying's in it as well, Mr. Vampire, as the policeman. And when the ghost runs at him, and he's got these swords. All of a sudden, this ghost just lands on him. I was on the floor laughing. And he's the complete opposite of his really suave sort of Taoist monk persona. He's playing an idiot, and he's brilliant at it. Like Don was saying on there, that it is like the prototype coming through, but you have to start somewhere, and it's a good example to start with.
Okay. All right, I guess that's it more or less. So before we close, okay, let's have a question for each. Okay, I'm gonna give you two choices, and you're gonna pick one. No explanation whatsoever, just pick one. So Ben, since you were the last one to talk, Jacky Chan or Sammo Hung?
Sammo Hung.
Adriana?
Sammo Hung.
Don?
Jacky.
Rouven?
Jacky.
Oh, so it falls to me. Okay.
We know who you're going to pick, don't we?
Okay, I like Jacky more. I don't know. It's because of the first film I saw, he was the protagonist, maybe. Okay, but I'm explaining. I shouldn't. Okay. Second question, again, Ben. Shaw Brothers or Golden Harvest?
Oh God, that's evil. I'll have to. I will go Shaw Brothers.
Adriana?
Well, I think so as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Don?
Shaw.
Sorry?
Shaw Brothers.
Okay, Rouven?
I haven't seen so many martial arts movies, but I have seen many of Golden Harvest, so I go with them.
Okay. Well, I'll go Shaw Brothers. So there are too many of them there, and the masterpieces are more just for the number.
That's my thing. I really like Golden Harvest a lot, but it's just the sheer number of masterpieces from Shaw Brothers.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess that's it for this episode of Asian Movie Past Talks. I hope you liked it. In case you liked it very much, you can also subscribe to our channel. We're doing a lot of these once every week. So from the whole Asian Movie Pals team, I'm not gonna name you again. Have a nice night and see you soon, hopefully. Bye.